Hey everybody, welcome back to In Bed with a Millennial. I'm the Millennial, Javeda Bay, and this is my bed. Welcome back to another week. Today we are talking about sexuality and sex education during adolescence. And if your adolescence was anything like mine, you really wish that this conversation would happen a lot sooner, don't you? Yes, I know, because we all know what sex ed in schools is like for adolescents. And it ain't all that in a bag of chips. So let's get into it. Firstly, what is happening to the body during adolescence? Because that is like the biggest thing. And people only just like slightly touch on it and never enough. So there are 4 different components that are changing during adolescence in relations to your body and sexuality. So the first is physically, because that beautiful thing called puberty, which we all do learn about. It's like your body goes through changes, yada, yada, yada. Yeah, your body does go through changes. The hormones kick in, like things start happening and you're like, whoa, what in the French toast is going on? And it looks different for everyone. I know me, my puberty was a wonky ride of no breast for a long time and then boom, breast. So it looks different for everyone. So when we teach about it, we should talk about the ways that it can differ from person to person, because it is not always this start, middle, end situation. It varies. It is a roller coaster ride. And honestly, how many of us actually enjoy puberty? None. So we need to talk about the physical aspects and the way that puberty looks different for different people, especially because we are inclusive. We are going to talk about what puberty can look like for transgender adolescents. Yes. Next up, you've got the cognitive, because as your body's changing, so is your brain. Your brain is doing funky things and you're like, why am I thinking what I'm thinking? What is happening to me? What are these brain changes? And the reward center is like, yo, gimme, gimme, gimme. Hence why teenage years are so rough, because you're like, I just want. I don't want to do, I just want. And that's a reward center. I mean, like, give me the good stuff without making me do anything for it. So we need to talk about that. Also with parents, because it will help ease the toughness of those adolescent years when you're raising a teenager and you're like, why? The reward center is just really screaming at them. And it's like, hey, you enjoyed this, so just keep doing it regardless of the consequences that your parents say are going to happen. Next up, we have emotional, because, you know, them hormones are happening, which makes you a little bit more emotional and you don't understand. And usually you're not given the guidebook on how to manage your hormones and your emotional expectations around things. So we need to talk about the emotional aspect and how your body's like, hey, guess what? This is called arousal and liking someone and like all those things. Yeah, don't you like it? Here's rejection. Now we're going to talk about how to handle that. We got to talk about the emotional side of it, because honestly, who here has had a conversation where they were like, so if someone doesn't like you, it may suck, but that's the way the cookie crumbles. No. Oh, only girls? Oh, interesting. Yeah, no, we need to talk about that emotional piece, especially that rejection piece, because that'll play into later in life. Guys, men, boys, everyone needs to learn about rejection and how to handle it as an emotional component of their life and their adolescent changes. Also, your hormones play a part into your emotions. We all know that. Like, hormones just really do a lot of things to us, and we need to know that and understand that it's natural and accept it, and not make people feel bad for being in an emotional state because their body is going through changes that they have never experienced before. Lastly, the social changes that come with adolescence. Everything changes. Everything changes. You go from being like best friends with people in middle school to like a whole new person shows up on the first day of high school and you're like, wait a second, we've been best friends for like 5 years. What's going on? Relationships change. You start to have crushes and then it's not reciprocated. So much changes in the social aspect, especially because you're in school. Your body's changing. That's changing the way people are interacting with you. We have to talk about it. So the first thing is understanding what's happening in the body. We have the physical, the cognitive, which is all up in the head, the emotional, and the social changes that are all happening as a part of adolescence. So then we know that those are the changes that are happening. So how do we teach the sex ed around those changes? I am so glad you asked. Firstly, we're going to talk about relationships. Like, that's not something that we just like wait to talk about when someone's in a relationship. No, we should introduce the concept around relationships and how different they can look in adolescence, like explaining to people, hey, friendships evolve, friendships fade away, things change. We need to explain how relationships can change, because guess what? They do in adolescence. We also need to talk about setting boundaries, keeping boundaries, and the existence of boundaries. Because as we have seen in media time and time again, boundaries in relationships, especially friendships, really do not exist in middle school, high school. Like, they just don't. People are just like, here's our friendship. It just goes the way it goes, yada, yada, yada. No. Boundaries should be in place in all types of relationships, but especially in friendships, especially in your formative years, because you ain't got to put up with bad people ruining your best years of your life, air quotes, because it ain't. Next up, we got to talk about body exploration, because as we know, in childhood, you're already exploring your body, but things kind of progress a little bit more in adolescence, and you may not just be exploring your body, but also someone else's. So let's talk about that, shall we? We should. And because we are getting into sex ed during adolescence, we are coming from a place of pleasure-based sex ed. Yes, we are talking about pleasure, not just like preventative sex ed, like, oh, don't get pregnant, don't get STIs. No, we're talking about, hey, you're probably gonna do some stuff that feels real good, and that's okay, because that's what sex ed should be about. Next up, we will talk about safer sex practices, because it is important. Like, you ain't just gonna send somebody out in a car and be like, yep, here you go, just do the thing because you enjoy driving. No, you're gonna give them the tools to do it in a safe manner so they get from point A to point B. So we're still gonna give those safer sex practices, but that's not the focal point of sex ed. We're not always gonna be talking about, oh, but was there a condom? Oh, but no. It's gonna be a part of it, but it ain't the whole dang thing. Next up, the big conversation that I feel should be a big part of all sex ed for adolescents. Am I ready for sexual activity? I feel like we kind of just like give them this information on like what it is, how to do it, not how to do it, but like what it is and like, you know, how to be safe about it, but not like, hey, let's actually talk about how to decide for yourself when you're ready. Because if your adolescence was anything like mine, peer pressure was how you thought you were ready. You were like, well, everybody else is doing it. No. So sex ed should include the conversation of like, how do I know when I'm ready to actually do things with people? Yeah, that should be a part of it. And then lastly, not preventatively, but informatively, we're going to talk about STIs and pregnancy, because they are realities of engaging in sexual intercourse or sexual activity of any kind, depending on what anatomy is involved. So we will talk about it, but that is not going to be the focal point, and it's not going to be that Mean Girls scene where it's like, if you have sex, you'll get pregnant and die. No, it's going to be like, hey, these are possibilities that can come from engaging in these types of activity. They shouldn't scare you away. It's just a reality of the fact, but you can do things to maybe minimize the potential of it happening. So yeah, sex ed during adolescence is extremely important, and good sex ed, not this like abstinence only, or not this like, oh my God, STIs, but like actual comprehensive, inclusive sex ed, and for everyone, not just heterosexual people. Oh my goodness, what wild. Yeah, everyone, comprehensive, inclusive sex ed. And if you're looking for more resources, because you know some adolescents, you teach adolescents, you just like hang out. I don't know why you would hang out with them as an adult, but like, you know what I mean. If you were looking for more resources on sexuality and sex ed for adolescents, check out amaze.org. They have a YouTube channel which has a lot of great videos. And guess what? If you're already on YouTube right now, you should just go subscribe to them after you finish watching this video. And you should also check out Scarleteen. I will also link those in the comments, but there's a lot of resources out there, continuously available, ever-growing, abundant field of information around sex ed for adolescents. So there's so many options you could use, point them in the direction of. Do that. If you don't feel comfortable doing it, use a different resource. But let's give adolescents comprehensive, inclusive sex ed, so that way, you know, they like move on into the rest of their life and they don't have like the stunted experience around their sexuality and sex ed. Okay? Thank you. Yes. All right. Well, that's all for today. I hope that you enjoyed this. Make sure you like it, subscribe, share it with all your friends, and come back next week, because we are talking about sexuality and sex ed during adulthood. Yes, that current phase that most of us are in. We're talking about it because guess what? We still need it. Yeah, I'm gonna see y'all later. Deuces.